Welcome everyone to the San Diego Business Journal and CCOE Cyber Trends 2020 panel. This kicks off our 4-part series this year, which includes cyber reports as well, and will culminate in the Cybersecurity Stewardship Awards come this fall. Well, cybersecurity is now everyone's business. The FBI is reporting a 300% increase in cyber crimes across all industries during the pandemic. And that's with an average cost of a data breach climbing over $4 billion. More than half of these attacks are aimed at small and medium-sized businesses, and that's our economy's engine. Now pair that with a global shortage of cyber professionals to thwart these attacks, and it becomes mission critical to address this systemic risk. The good news is that San Diego is leading the charge with more than 870 cyber firms, as well as the U.S. Navy's Naval Warfare Systems Command. The cluster now accounts for more than 24,000 jobs and has a total economic impact of $3.5 billion. And that's equal to hosting 9 Super Bowls or 23 Comic-Cons annually. This collaborative ecosystem is developing new technologies, defenses, and cyber warriors to combat this ever-evolving threat landscape. So we're going to actually tap into this robust expertise with our esteemed panel today to talk cyber trends and mitigation strategies. And so it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our panelists. Cy, we'll start with you. Cy Huda is the CEO of CyberCatch.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. Honored to be with you and the rest of the panelists. Excited to be here. I'm the founder, chairman, and CEO of CyberCatch, and we are focused on the small and medium-sized businesses in North America, so US and Canada. And we're a cybersecurity software as a service company. What we do is we first help a small and medium-sized business implement just the right type and amount of cybersecurity controls so they can stay safe. And then we automatically test using our proprietary platform, the controls continuously, so we can find security holes so that attackers cannot find them and exploit them. So we're excited. We're based in San Diego. We have office in Vancouver also, Canada, and thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Cy. And then we'll turn to you, Andre Polakoff, the founder and CTO of SearchBug, Inc.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. So I represent a small, medium-sized company here in Carlsbad, California. I started this company way back in 1995, if you can imagine, as a hobby, and then it became a company in 2000. So we've been online for a long time and have seen a lot of things changing and a significant growth of cybersecurity threats, which I will talk more today. But what we do is we are a business-to-business online service, providing data related to names, addresses, phone numbers, names. So companies come to our website to enrich marketing lists, to verify phone numbers, email addresses, do background checks, and anything that has to do with people or business data.
Great, thank you so much, Andre. And last but certainly not least, Miguel Sampo, Senior Director of Riskrecon, a Mastercard company.
We are a Mastercard company, right? Everybody thinks about the credit card company. Well, what are we doing in cybersecurity? So super excited to be here. This is my 24th year as a cybersecurity practitioner. Engineer by trade, and I crossed over to the dark side, became a sales guy. So I lead a sales team at Riskrecon. Excited to be here though, but I focus specifically in the third-party risk management section. Pretty big area right now, what we're seeing, right, with all the trends around supply chain, vendor risk management, et cetera. Another just crucial element of anybody's cybersecurity program. So excited to be here and talk to you guys a little about what we do, but based out of San Diego, so I am local here to you guys. And so if there's anything that we can do to help, please, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to the CCOE or myself, and we're happy to engage and talk to you guys about what we do as well. Thanks,
wonderful. Lisa. Thank you so much, Miguel. Well, we'll jump right in. Since the pandemic began, we have seen a considerable increase in large-scale attacks like Colonial Pipeline, Kaseya, and SolarWinds that made mainstream headlines. Cy, what do you think will be the biggest cybersecurity risk and challenges facing businesses this year, based on CyberCatch's recent report?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So let me just, for just a second, back up a little bit and point out the current conditions that we are having in 2022, which are hostility among a variety of nations. So, for example, Russia is aggressively pursuing cyber, in addition to military exercises, and against Ukraine, its neighbor. And so that is a threat for the United States also, not directly, but indirectly. And that is what I call unintended consequence. And I'll point to what happened 5 years ago with NotPetya. If anybody remembers that, it was one of the worst attacks faced globally. And over 10 billion in losses happened from that ransomware. And what happened there was a Russian group backed by the government of Russia went after an accounting software company in Ukraine because they had a lot of government customers in Ukraine. And what they wanted to do was infect that company with ransomware, which they did in its software update process. And they really wanted to attack those Ukraine government agencies. And the ransomware was called NotPetya, and it was very destructive. It wasn't about ransom payments. It was really encrypting, the boot of a computer irreversibly, so it couldn't be decrypted. And the goal was to, basically stop operations, wipe out data, cause damages. But the unintended consequence of that was that thousands of companies throughout the world, especially in the United States, were impacted because they were also customers of this accounting software company. And those folks suffered significant damages from not being able to recover from the ransomware for days, weeks, and months. And it caused over 10 billion in damages. So that's what I call the unintended consequence. And this is just one hostility that's happening where we're not directly involved, but there's going to be a ripple effect. And that's why the US government is really alerting everybody in the United States to this threat. There's a Shields Up advisory from CISA and DHS. So every single organization in the United States must take this seriously and think about what I call unintended consequence. So that unfortunately will happen again this year from other nation hostilities that we can anticipate here. And again, we may have the ripple effect to us. The second thing is that we are seeing the threat actors, some are criminal gangs, some are governments, that are exploiting older and lower score vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities on applications, on infrastructure are alerted to by NVD, National Vulnerability Database, the US government, and others. And there's usually a patch issued either before or right at the time of the advisory, and folks should take it seriously and go ahead and patch. Those vulnerabilities are rated from critical to lesser, if you will, and they're scored. So critical is 9 to 10. Well, most people jump on criticals because they're critical, they're higher, rated, urgent. But what they don't get to for limited resources or just forgetting about it is the lower score and older vulnerabilities. So for example, in 2019, there was over 12,000 vulnerabilities reported with CVSS scores. That majority of them were less than 9. And so those vulnerabilities are now being exploited, even though that was over almost 3 years ago, because the attackers have realized that a bunch of companies haven't implemented those patches for whatever reason. And so those exploits are available for them to exploit. So I predict, unfortunately, that 2022 will be a year where there'll be a lot more of those exploits. A lot of them will be by nation states, a lot of them by criminal gangs, where they'll find those companies with those older, lower score vulnerabilities and exploit them from thousands of miles away. So that is another unfortunate trend that we see. And there'll be attacks against small to mid-sized businesses also, unfortunately. As you mentioned, Lisa, CyberCatch researched and scanned 21,850 web assets, internet facing, of small to mid-sized businesses in US and Canada. And what we found were alarming findings. So in the US, for example, a third, 33%, were vulnerable to spoofing. And in Canada, it was 84%, for example. So those are, again, red flags. And unfortunately, these are small to mid-sized businesses that are not, able to, because they don't have the resources or paying attention to the fact that they have vulnerabilities on their websites and web assets, internet facing, that could be exploited by attackers thousands of miles away. So unfortunately, those attacks will happen, and ransomware will be one that small to mid-sized businesses in particular will face because it's a good payout for the bad guys. So those are the three predictions from my point of view.
Great. Thank you so much, Cy. And I think kind of following on that, unfortunately, as you mentioned, these bad actors are targeting these attacks at small and medium-sized businesses that are already facing so many challenges with the pandemic, as well as the digital transformation and this economic uncertainty. So, Andre, what kind of security threats do these small and medium businesses like SearchBug experience, and perhaps why do you think these small businesses are being targeted?
It's a good question. I think most people think of, when people think about cybersecurity, they think about like banks or government organizations or big companies, and small companies. You would think don't have like big secrets to steal from, or even if you put a ransomware, they wouldn't pay much. So where's the catch? So why are they coming for? Like from my perspective, there are two primary reasons. One is to steal credit cards and passwords. So that can be used. Say you steal credit card on one site, and then you can use the same card to sell it on a black market somewhere else. And people often use the same password on many different sites. So they may not be interested in this particular customer information on your site, but they will try to log into like Amazon or airline website or somewhere else to make purchases with a stolen card and a stolen password. And why this particular thief happens is that small business typically don't have enough resources or even focus or thinking of security. And so they will outsource website development to some junior programmer or some offshore team, focusing on functional requirements, making sure that it looks good, it does what it's supposed to do, but they don't pay much attention to security and protection, and they would leave passwords or credit cards in the plain text. So if someone gets access to your database or hacking in other ways, so all information is gone. And so the other thing we're noticing is, at least for us, is theft of service is a major issue. So if your business is providing some valuable service, information, you will be a target. So like, as I mentioned before, we have information that's any business would want, like we are allowed to append phone numbers to a list of customers who have names and addresses. We can get you emails, or we can get you phone numbers. We can tell if those phone numbers like belong to cell phone or not, or if they are active. So we have background checks, and we have all kind of useful information, and people trying to get it for free. And how do they do that? So back to credit card fraud, I know it's not necessarily falls under cybersecurity, but for us, it's the same problem dealing with unauthorized access to our systems in order to steal the data. So with a stolen credit card. So what happens with this is why it's important, because you're not only going to lose your revenue because you're not going to get paid, you're going to get tons of chargebacks, and it will amount your processor fees, and you can credit card fees, and you can even be banned by a processor. 15 years ago, PayPal called us one day and say, because of the high chargeback rates, your business account has been closed and you can no longer accept credit cards. And there was no like advance notice, we could negotiate. And all of a sudden, because of the high chargebacks, we were out of business, couldn't collect any revenue until we built a new integration with another provider. And I will talk about this later. SQL injection or SQL injections is most common way how hackers get access to your website. So basically what they do, they manipulate query strings, or they put something in the forms, and they do it in an automated way to trick your database that you're not only searching for customer order, but also show me additional information how your database is structured. And so once they find what database you're using, what the table structure was, then they try to manipulate it through the same your website. They don't necessarily log into your server, and they try to get to admin and support accounts. They try to run the services for free. So this is very, very common. And obviously password guessing, tampering with the password resets, that's sometimes a tricky feature. So, and they can create a partial account, go try to reset password and get in. We've seen it all. And also, if you just a quick, if you have a development server or a test server, protect it as if it was a production server, because you have unfinished code. And hackers can take advantage of your lower level vulnerability on your development servers that may have the same sensitive data. So that's kind of like what I see in trenches.
It's so helpful because truly so many of the companies here in our region are small businesses, and we're seeing many of these businesses that are part of these larger supply chains in the region that are part of these key sectors like life sciences and tourism and defense. Miguel, I think Andre kind of set this up very nicely to have you speak a little bit about the trends that Riskrecon is seeing in supply chain risk and how we can create greater communal resiliency.
Absolutely, Lisa. Thank you. I mean, I'm going to go back to what Cy said at the beginning in the State of the Union, this unintended consequences. That's brilliant, right? And then Andre talks a little bit about SQL injections, websites, public information, right? And so here's what I'll say. Any company operating with any kind of modern technology today or a modern technology environment can fall victim to any of these more sophisticated cyber attacks, right? Whether it's a ransomware attack, like you mentioned Colonial Pipeline earlier, or Kaseya, or even the more sophisticated attacks that we're seeing, right? I work for Mastercard, and we see all sorts of stuff in our cyber intelligence kind of database and kind of in and out of payment processors, acquirers, issuers, et cetera. But at the end of the day, what it all comes down to, Lisa, is that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. San Diego's got such a vast economic, kind of, I guess, background where we've got the military here, defense, we got financial institutions, manufacturing. We're a border town, right next to Mexico. We've got retail, huge tourism and hospitality. It doesn't matter across the board, right? Attackers aren't necessarily just picking one or the other. Yes, there's some that are probably more beneficial. They would love to go after fintech, right? They want to steal, but any information they can steal, or if you've got information, it's going to make it a target, right? And so they're not picking and choosing one over the other. They're picking and choosing, which is the weak actor, right? Which is the one that's not protecting themselves. And that goes into this conversation that Andre was just talking about right now, right? Public facing information. And that's the world that we play in at Riskrecon. We're a Mastercard company, is we leverage technology to go out and understand which are the weak links in the chain, right? How do we look at those? And so what I'll come back to is cyber hygiene matters, right? Having good cyber hygiene. The days of just having great antivirus and a great firewall, those days are long gone. Those are, yeah, that's a product of the 90s, right? You not only have to worry about protecting your castle, but you have to also worry about protecting yourself of who you're doing business with, right? Who are these supply chains? Who are these vendors? And what do they look like? Because if an attack was to come through one of those vendors and make their way into me, how do I protect myself from that, right? How do I make sure that my vendor is doing all the right things to keep me protected as well, right? And so those are the conversations, that's the dialogue that we're working, or the world, the reality that we're in now is having collaboration with our vendors. I mean, I'm seeing contracts being written that when company A is going to do business with company B, there's language that's going in now that says, if you're going to do business with me, we use a vendor risk management tool or a third-party risk management TPRM tool that we use regularly, and we run scans and assessments that if you want to continue to do business with me, we're going to ask that you maintain a certain grade, a certain level of hygiene. So when you ask me about the resiliency, it's about collaboration. It's about holding your vendors accountable, understanding how we do that, right? How do we hold them accountable to make sure that they are ensuring and doing due diligence in securing their infrastructure, their assets, right? And those pertinent pieces of the modern technology era, if that makes sense. So
absolutely. Yes. And we're seeing more and more of not just the larger companies doing this, but insurance companies when it comes to cyber insurance. We're seeing this in terms of just regional resiliency. One of the great programs that we work with some of these companies here in the region is creating with the city of Carlsbad and the city of Vista's resiliency programs that really starts to provide greater awareness across all small businesses. So that way we can make sure that those supply chains don't have that soft underbelly. So we're very grateful to the team here for participating in some of those regional resiliency programs. And I think, now that we've sufficiently scared our audience as to what 2022 looks like in terms of cyber threats and risks, and I've already put on my tinfoil hat. Cy, what are some of the steps that every business should take as we're kicking off this year to help mitigate these risks and provide a more secure position for their businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And I think Miguel mentioned a key word, digital. Every business must recognize that they really are a digital business. Who doesn't have a website these days? Who doesn't use email, right? Who doesn't have a provider that stores data for them on the cloud or on their network? Who doesn't have IT? I mean, that's just the way you've got to be able to do business. So first step is for every business, especially small and medium-sized business, to recognize that they are a digital business. And because they're a digital business, they have cyber risk, which is the risk that an attacker will break in. They'll break in either through an employee by fooling them with a phishing email, or having them download malware, allowing the access, or they will break in from outside, like we were talking earlier, because a vulnerability is there on a web asset, internet facing, hasn't been patched, it's not going to be exploited to break in. Or, as Miguel mentioned, to a supplier, somebody who already supplies them with something, product or service or software. And so let's go attack them because they're the weaker link in the chain, and then through them get in. So that's the second step that every business must recognize. One is, first, they're a digital business. Second, these are the three ways that attackers can get in. And regardless of size, there is a reward for these attackers, which is either steal data, valuable data, or infect ransomware and ask for a payment. Those are some of the things the businesses must recognize. The other thing they must recognize is, and I laid this out in my book, I wrote a book called Next Level Cybersecurity. I have the privilege of it being a best-selling book, but in it, I looked at all of these hacks, hundreds of them around the world, and trying to figure out how they happen and could anything be done with them to prevent them. And what I discovered is that there are going to be signals, and I lay out 15 signals in the book, but there's 5 steps that every single attack occurs. It's just the way the process is. So first step is reconnaissance. So the attackers will, sort of examine you from the outside and your suppliers, reconnaissance. Then once they figure out how to break in, they'll break in. That's the intrusion step, second step. The third step is then lateral movement. Once they're inside your local area network or your cloud, they're going to move around, try to find out where is the data, where are the crown jewels. And then they'll do command and control, which is where they want to figure out a way to either inject the ransomware or extract the data out. So they're going to try to connect up with one of their servers outside, discovered. And then finally, the bad deed, which is either exfiltration or ransomware infection. So those are the 5 steps. That's the other thing that every business must recognize, that every single attack will be following that. So therefore, the business has to say, okay, where are my crown jewels? What are my crown jewels? And therefore, understanding that these are the steps that an attacker will take, what controls do I have in place? Prevention, detection, and response. And so that's the way to identify what the current posture is, what are the gaps and blind spots, and then take risk mitigation action. And therefore, then get to a stronger cyber risk posture. But then don't stop there. Then you've got to continually test those controls to make sure nothing is broken or is ineffective or is missing. And then if you find them that it is missing or broken or ineffective, then fix them. That's what we do at CyberCatch. We help businesses implement the necessary controls and then continuously test them with our platform. So we find the holes so attackers cannot find them and exploit them. But that's what's going to happen. Finally, what I will say is one piece of advice for every single business, no matter what size, especially small to mid-size. And this is a pretty effective tool, which is do a tabletop exercise and run through a scenario like ransomware, which most businesses are susceptible to, and see, will you be able to respond to ransomware attack? How will you respond? Are you going to be able to survive it? And therefore, you'll be able to identify quickly gaps and blind spots, and at least take some mitigation action to be better prepared. So when the real nasty thing happens, you're not going to be suffering a big damage and be able to quickly recover. And be able to find things like, oh, guess what? My backups, I have some backup files that are labeled .bac. So the ransomware can easily scan and find them and encrypt them also. Oh, gee, not all my backups are all online, not offline or offsite. So they can be still accessible by ransomware or by the attacker. Oh, gee, even though they're offline and offsite, guess what? It's not that easy to put them back online. There's a lot of steps I got to do. And some things, aren't backed up properly. So all those little chinks in the armor you can find through a tabletop exercise, and then therefore you're better prepared. So that's a really good risk mitigation tool that I would recommend to every single organization.
Thank you so much, Sai. I think that's incredibly helpful because so many companies, they don't even know where to start. And you don't want to be having this conversation in the middle of the attack. This is definitely the thoughts and the processes that every organization needs to be preparing for. And so I think, coupling the onslaught of attacks now with the global shortage of cybersecurity professionals, Miguel, can you speak to the trends in automation and ways businesses can effectively maintain their cyber hygiene when they are potentially, short-staffed and may not have the resources internally?
Absolutely, Lisa. So let me actually take a step back. I'm going to go back to Sai. You mentioned digital era, right? And you're spot on. One of my previous roles before I was at Riskrecon, I worked for Mandiant, and I worked specifically on incident response planning. And I'm not going to throw stones or pick on anybody in particular, but I am going to say very blatant here is that small companies oftentimes tend to think we're small, we don't have anything to worry about. Not true. Right? You mentioned tabletop exercises, red team, blue team, purple team, going through an incident response plan and understanding what is valuable. If you were to suffer an attack, what is that worth to you? $1 million, $2 million? The average cost of a breach today is $2.3 million. That's as of the Ponymon as of last year, right? So if you're an organization, and no matter what size you are, you got to think about that, right? A breach, a compromise, whether it be PII data, intellectual property, IP, whatever that may be, what's that worth to you? $2.3 million is a lot of money, right? And so that's on average. So to Sai's point, nobody is invincible from this. Understanding where the weak links in the chain, or I think he said kinks in the armor, lie, is absolutely paramount. Going back to your question, Lisa, what can we do? Listen, I'm a big believer in this thing called AI, artificial intelligence, right? How do we do more with less, right? In a world where manpower is becoming very expensive, there's a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. The way to do this is leverage technology. You can then, by leveraging a technology that's got AI, like Riskrecon's platform, for example, you don't need to add more heads. This is not a scenario where you need 15 people running a team, right? Eyes on glass 24/7. You can leverage technologies, like in our case, it would be Riskrecon, a platform that'll go out and scan the internet, just like the bad guys do, right? We scan the internet for these publicly facing machines and servers, understand where are there, machines that are vulnerable, machines that haven't been patched, where somebody hasn't done due diligence and making sure that the machines are taken care of. So I believe in leveraging AI is a great return for organizations, right? You can now take heads that you may have allocated towards this project, use the technology and reallocate those heads into other pertinent pieces of your IT or other parts of your business to give you a significant return, right, on that. So big believer in AI, leveraging technology to do more with less. 24/7 eyes, right? Alerts, you have alerting mechanisms, you've got triggers that can be set up to notify you when there's a anomalous behavior or something changes, right? For example, with Riskrecon, you have scoring. If you are monitoring a set of vendors and you want them all to maintain a certain level of grade, and you see that grade fall, you get an alert. Now you can go look at it and say, oh, what's happened here? Maybe I got to keep my eyes on this guy or guys or gals and see what's going on, right? So I'm a big believer, and I love the whole AI piece. I think more and more we're going to see more and more AI technology-driven platforms becoming mainstream as part of a program. And what I'll tell you today is that, I mentioned it earlier in my previous dialogue here for a second, but the days of just having basic technology to protect you is not enough, right? And that's what we got to look at, right? How do we protect ourselves? How do we get visibility and have a proactive tools in place to give us the early visibility, early detection, right? Not just the AV firewall intrusion detection systems of those days. So I don't know if that addressed the question completely, Lisa, but a big believer in leveraging AI technologies with AI to help us and not necessarily always needing to hire more people. People are expensive, right? I get that. There's a shortage of people with those skill sets. And so as we continue to train people or make a marketplace, specifically in San Diego, where we have more cybersecurity professionals, that's going to be great. But we also have to remember that those heads are not cheap.
Well, the good news is, though, I will say in San Diego, a study that we conducted with the San Diego Regional EDC showed that San Diego's cyber industry is actually employing AI at 3 times that of any other industry. And the good news is this is not eating jobs. We're actually seeing tremendous growth within the industry from a jobs perspective. What it's actually doing is providing opportunities for expansion and growth. And that's basically kind of at that mid-level, allowing us to evolve some of these IT roles and cyber roles while then still being able to open those positions to this tremendous pipeline coming in. So AI is a great opportunity for growth within this industry. And as Miguel says, you don't have to have eyes on screen at all times. It does provide some of the smaller companies with the 870 tremendous firms that we have in the region resources to be able to provide assistance if you don't have robust IT teams. And so I think, Andre, having been in the trenches as a small tech company, how do you deal with cyber threats at SearchBug? And any advice for businesses like yours?
Sure. My first advice would be minimize exposure. So just look at data that you have that is sensitive or could be a target and encrypt it, at least. Back it up and encrypt it, like passwords, credit cards, any other sensitive information. So that's the primary areas of concern. There is even better options for like passwords and credit cards. Don't store them on your servers. There are ways to do that. Like we added login with Google, login with Facebook, login with LinkedIn. So this way we authenticate a user at Google or LinkedIn. They come back already, and we trust the LinkedIn that this is that business account. They don't need to have provide a password on SearchBug. So it's and their passwords will not be stored on. So it's recommendations for everyone as users. So when you see login with Google, it's actually or whatever Facebook, it's protecting you. It's they're not sharing any information except that they authenticated you. I'm talking about the social media sites. Credit cards. So there are solutions from Stripe or Braintree. There are so many where you don't have to, they provide you with easy code, you put on your website, and this small window is connected directly to the credit card provider. So the credit card number never touches your servers. So, so this is a saver. So you automatically become PCI compliant, and you don't have to worry about a credit card being stolen. So this is two easy things to do for small businesses. And then I agree with Cy you need to think about how hackers work. So they look for low vulnerability and kind of like, and like what we see is they're probing first and start scanning before they launch the full-scale attack. So they may not know what technology your website is, what kind of databases you use. So they will try to use different commands that go with the different operating systems and whatever to see if a website responds. And then they once they figure it out, like say you're using this database, this website technology, they'll have a specific attack that is specific to your server. And what you need to do in this case, analyze your logs, website logs. They will tell you a lot of useful information. If you see someone trying to access pages that don't exist on your website, or they are kind of like related to a completely different technology, so it's this URL never published. So someone intentionally try to go to your website and call this file to run administrative interface or something, or check the health of the site. So know those IPs, know those footprints, and if attack happens, and sometimes you notice there is attack because say website is responding slow. Why it's responding slow? We didn't make any changes. But like if you look at the logs, log file is 10 times bigger than usual, than any other days. And every single line is at random IP, a bunch of stuff happening to your website. So if something happens, like try to analyze, go deep and see what actually happened. So you may find signs of attack when you don't think they're happening. So like say research in logs, we found say attackers often come with something called headless Chrome. That's just a type of a browser that you can program. It looks like from a web browser, like a normal, for website, like a normal browser, but they use it to scan your site. So we block this browser because none of users will use it. So SQL injections. So that's my favorite topic. So we got hit really hard like many years ago. So nothing was stolen, but we saw the all the effort that was put in. So what did I do? I went on the internet and found SQL injection tutorials. There are an open view, so you can learn all about this. And based on this, I built a whole library of so-called keywords that attackers use to probe and attack the site. Now, every single query in SearchBug, whether it's a URL, a form submission, anything, I checked against this list. And if we find any keyword that someone's trying to use, the IP address of the attacker is blocked automatically. So we don't have to do it. So, and the list of IPs that are blocked is keep on growing. So there's other things that people do, like they try to log in to the same account from say different accounts from the same IP address. So they'll try 5 accounts, or 10, likely fraud. We block them automatically. Someone tries to access administrative site or any like development servers from not allowed IP. We block automatically. So we've built tools to protect ourselves. So all the sensitive information is IP protected. So only IP address from our office, from a home office are allowed. So you cannot get to secure systems. So, I want to give you one specific example that I think worked really wonderful for us. How we protecting ourselves now from credit card fraud and chargebacks. We implemented very interesting solution that includes phone number verifications. You know, sometimes you get email verification. They say, click this to verify your email. To me, emails are disposable. I mean, you can go sign up for email and throw it away. Getting a phone number is a little bit more difficult. So you can, but so people typically stick with their phone numbers. So we either send the code by text, or we have there is an automated call to tell the code, and you enter the code. So we know this phone number does belong to this person. They can respond to it. But what happens next? It's like typically say, okay, I have a good phone number, but they put a billing address and they put a billing name, right? So we have our own data where we can check if the number that they answered goes with this name on a credit card, goes with the billing address. And if it doesn't, it's a red flag. It means, yes, there is a person behind this phone, but it's not the person on a credit card. Whose credit card has been used. So these accounts are automatically put on hold for manual verifications. And so obviously we have access to this data, we can do it, but in reality, we have APIs available for other businesses. So if anyone's interested in saying verifying names against, like phone number against name or address, or check if emails are fake or phone numbers is active. So we have the services available through API and files. So, but my main point is just you have to stay vigilant and stay proactive. Like if something happens, don't let it go by. See why it happened. So it could have been an attempt to penetrate your website. So pay attention to details and thoroughly analyze what happens, because you may find something that you can fix. So that's kind of like a little bit again from real situations dealing with the problem. Yeah.
It's very helpful. And I think smaller companies like to hear from those that are similar in the experiences that they've had, because it resonates as well. So I think we're coming to the end of this fabulous discussion, but I want to have everybody have an opportunity with their final thoughts on kind of the cyber risk landscape and how San Diego companies can better prepare and protect not just their businesses, but their data, their employees, their partners, and their customers.
Yeah, for sure, Lisa. I mean, I was thinking about what Andre just mentioned, right? Multi-factor authentication, or security and layers, is what we talk about as security professionals. Something Sai is probably very well versed. I've not read your book, but I'm going to. I love the 5 steps that you outlined in there. And I guess what I would add is that when we think about the risk landscape, it's become much more sophisticated, and the vectors or the way that they're attacking are becoming more sophisticated and changing all the time, right? It's evolving. And so is it going to be possible to stay in front of the bad guys? Probably not, right? The bad guys are always going to have a leg up, but understanding and protecting yourself and invoking mechanisms like Andre laid out, multi-factor authentication. Sai mentioned the digital era, right? And using things like AI, using new technologies to stay out in front as much as we can is going to be critical. And I think what I'll leave you guys with is that as I look in San Diego, I'm a resident here in San Diego as well, lots of small companies. And I can't tell you how many times I have conversations where a small company says, we're not that big. We don't need that. We don't have to worry about that. And then 6 months later, they're calling because they have a problem, right? We talked about the insurance agencies or insurance industry earlier. Yes, there is no mandate, no requirement that you have to have this stuff today. It's coming. Right? And cyber insurance is a big thing. It's very real. Insurance companies are not going to write policies on a company that they're going to have to pay out on. So we are going to see more requirements. We are going to see more mandates. And I think that the biggest part of all this is every company, big, small, medium, doesn't matter. You got to have a plan. You got to have a security program. And what I would recommend or advise is any of these companies, have a plan, understand what your cybersecurity, if you're in the modern technology era and you've got machines that are out there, you got to develop a plan. What's my program look like, right? I've got this. So if something does happen, I go to this, or who are my contacts, or hire a great company to do all that for you, right? They can handle all that. But the days of set it and forget it, yeah, not happening. You're going to fall victim to it at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? And so I don't know, Cy, Andre, what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Cy.
Yeah, no, Miguel, well said. I think, back to the point about every business really needing to think they are a digital business and they have cyber risk is the first step. Andre shared some really good best practices. You shared some really good best practices. I would say let's have these businesses really think about how to implement them. And a lot of times, they not only think, Miguel, that it's not going to be them that are going to be affected because they're not that large or small. And as you pointed out, no, everyone's at risk, but also they think it'll cost a lot of money. Andre just shared some really smart, best practices. They don't cost that much money. They just cost a little bit of focus, a little bit of investment initially, and then now you've got it in play. So, it's really finding the right resources to help you implement these controls cost effectively is the key. But, you got to think about it as this is your business. And I have to say, we're seeing lots of instances, especially small to mid-size, where it's really an existential threat. So for example, in our SMBVR research report, we did not disclose the names, but we shared a couple of stories in there of a couple of small businesses where they just couldn't survive a ransomware attack. One of them got hit, and this was a small medical practice. These were doctors, a handful of doctors that were just saving lives. And so they never thought they would get a ransomware attack, but they did. And so they were really angry, and they wanted, this large amount of Bitcoins. The doctor said, no, we're not going to pay you. How dare you attack us? We're saving lives. Go find somebody else. The attackers laughed and said, so what? You got to pay. The doctor said, no, we're not going to pay you. And they talked to their IT provider and try to, recoup or regroup and, pull up the backups. Couldn't do it. Not only were their data files all encrypted, but also all backups were encrypted. So they couldn't even see patient records. And this went on for a couple of weeks and into almost a month. And patients fled. And they basically decided to shut the business down because they couldn't access patient records. It would be malpractice to diagnose a patient without looking at patient records. Patients had already fled. The business was just decimated. And so they had to shut down the business. So that's a worst case scenario that I think what we're all saying is, don't let this happen to you.
Right.
Think proactively, be proactive and take some of these best practices we've shared and implement them and get ahead of the curve. And then you'll be successful.
Well said, Cy. I couldn't agree more with you, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what size, kind of industry. I mean, data's data, right? If they can steal information, it's got some value to somebody somewhere, right? I was reading, so I would offer to the crowd or those listeners, visit the Riskrecon website. We've got tons of white papers that are not just our white papers, right? Gartner papers, things in the financial fintech market that talk about types of attacks and what we're seeing and kind of these trends that are existing. But if it's data and it's out there, it's susceptible, right? And how do you protect that? What I was going to say is I was reading a study that credit card numbers are a great target, but actually what's more valuable to attackers now beyond a credit card number is a social security number, personal information, right? Because then they can go open a bunch of credit cards under that personal information. And that's worth much more than one credit card, right? So if there's a database and it's got your name, your date of birth, your social security number, your address, that's more valuable. Think about that, right? And if you're an organization and you store that kind of information, you are a target, right? And so anyways, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's, it's awesome, right? I mean, it's evolving, it's scary, but there are things that we can do. There are steps that we can take to, protect ourselves, organizations that can help you do that as well. That can guide you through that. And the CCOE is awesome, right? Wealth of resources there as well, Lisa. So anyways, I appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And Andre, any final thoughts?
I think I've provided a lot of sort of like insight, like what we see and what we do, and I think other small businesses can protect themselves as well. I think the first thing you have to realize that just like Miguel and Sai said, if it didn't happen to you, it will happen to you. So it's just a matter of time, or maybe it happened and you didn't notice. So this is possible too. So this ransomware, it's one way to deal with it. The other is just come in, steal, leave, and open the door open, leave the door open, come back next time. So for business owners who are not technical, right? I think, what do I do? So at least ask questions, talk to your developer, talk to your IT small group and say, what are we doing with the protection? Can someone come and steal passwords or credit cards? Do you have like any sort of like monitoring for SQL injections or something else? So you can ask simple questions, and that person can help. They just don't know that it's important to you. So it has to come from the top. So even though you as a business owner may not know how to do it, there is help from companies like Miguel's, and you can do some self-service help like we did, but you need to make it a priority. I 100% agree with everybody.
Well, this has been an absolutely eye-opening discussion, I think, for our audience. And I think bottom line is cybersecurity is now everyone's business. And so we thank you all for the great discussion and thoughts for our audience. As Miguel mentioned, Cyber Center of Excellence is a nonprofit. We have a tremendous plethora of resources on our website, sdccoe.org, that are all free. And we can provide connectivity into this tremendous ecosystem that we have here that include companies like CyberCatch, Riskrecon, and SearchBug. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. And listeners, please catch us for our next quarterly panel and report. And don't forget to check out the Cybersecurity Stewardship Awards that will launch towards the fall. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sai. Bye, Andre.